My name is Martin Webber. I'm Professor of Social Work at the University of York. I've been interested in co-production for many years. Thinking back to my original social work training, co-production was implicit in what we were taught, and in my practice subsequently was implicit as much as possible within what we did, with certain limitations. In our original training, we were taught to respect people and to put them at the heart of what we were doing. And that, for me, embodies what co-production is all about. But then when you go and work in a service, when you are a practitioner, you're within an institution, the dynamics change. And what you might want to do and how you might want to work with people changes. So my experience of co-production has been one of perhaps frustration in terms of wanting to do it better, wanting to genuinely co-produce, but being within a power structure where that has been very, very difficult. I suppose, just to reflect back on what I think co-production is, at its heart is an understanding of our true commonality as human beings. The fact that whatever problems, issues, challenges, assets, strengths we may have, we share one thing in common, and that is the fact that as people we are human beings, and therefore there should be a genuine sense of equality. The way in which society is developed, the way in which we develop in terms of professionals and professionalism, there are power dynamics flying around, which have their place, but also can get in the way. My background as a social worker, as a mental health social worker, from my perspective has been very much around trying to empower people, to challenge the system which we are working within, that we have an identification with the institutions within which we work, but we also seek to challenge those and to challenge the power structures that are within those. When I was working as a mental health social worker, we had tremendous power given to us by statute, by the Mental Health Act, for example, in terms of what we can and can't do. And with that power, I mean, it's a tremendous cliche, but comes tremendous responsibility in terms of managing that and being very careful that you're listening to people. And that, for me, is where co-production is perhaps least possible, where you could wield tremendous powers to deprive somebody of their liberty in terms of compulsory admission to hospital. That's perhaps where co-production is much more difficult. However, where I've seen it working best is where people are able to engage on a completely level playing field with professionals, with researchers. I can give an example from my own experience in terms of doing research. I found that trying to develop practice, my research is mainly around social intervention research in mental health services, that trying to develop practice, which I believe that this does, can only genuinely be done when you're working alongside and with people who have lived experience, and have received services within the mental health system. Basically because their perspective is the most important one. It's very much about doing with, sharing with, creating together, rather than doing to. The notion of expertise is shared. Well, not just the notion of expertise, but expertise itself is shared. That's the most important thing with co-production. It's a phrase which is overused, it's a phrase which is misunderstood, and it's a phrase which is abused, and probably the glib ways that I'm describing it now can be understood with many more nuances than I can attribute them in a very, very short time. But one of the examples of practice which we have developed, which can be termed as co-productive, is a model which I've talked about previously in the seminar series called the Connecting People model. And at its heart is a co-productive set of practices where a worker and an individual co-design the intervention. So it's not assuming that one person has power, authority, knowledge. It's very much that is shared, that there is a genuine coming together and co-designing what the practice looks like, what the intervention, if you like, looks like. It's very much around a mutuality. For me, that's what co-production in professional practice should look like. I think it's very difficult to achieve in reality, and the systems in which we are working within mental health services detract from that type of practice. It makes it very difficult to do in reality because of different priorities. It's often not always possible because of different situations, but it's certainly desirable. As the narrative of co-production has become much more widely established in mental health services, I've become both hopeful and, I suppose, pessimistic about its prospects for the future. The hope within me is that people are listening and changing the way in which they are thinking about working with people. But the pessimistic side of me says that is just lip service, that change is ephemeral, and the power imbalances which are there won't really shift. However, what I have seen over the last 10-15 years is a more genuine interest in listening to people's experiences, their stories, what they can contribute. Seeing the growth of service users, survivor-led social enterprises, for example, delivering their own services. I've seen the power of networks to come together, to bring a critical mass of people together, to share, to enjoy, and to advocate for themselves. It is only about, I suppose it's a rebalancing in that power and structure, which you can force some change through. I think that there's a long way to go, and I don't expect to see much change in my lifetime, but it's a generational shift which we may see in the future. I suppose, concluding on a positive note, I have seen and I know of very many mental health professionals who seek to be genuinely co-productive in what they do. Many may be inhibited by the system which they're working within, but I do know many very caring people who genuinely have people's best interests at heart. It's unfortunate that it's often the system, the institution which they are working within constrains their activity, and they feel constrained by it. But I suppose my hope for the future is that bringing together like-minded people, sharing ideas about co-production, what could be possible in terms of shaping mental health services, should hope to inspire people and to lead to change in the future.